Okay. Claire says, Arian and Jacob, can you hear me? Okay. I cannot hear you, but I don't know if you're talking.
I'm muted. Can you hear me now?
Great. Okay, Claire, there's a button, a green button at the top that says share my audio and video.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Claire. Okay, got her. And Emily. Great. And Claire's coming. She should pop up in a minute. Great. And then I'll leave at the end. Once we get
And Troy. And yeah, we'll see Troy coming in a minute. Look at that. We're like we're almost there.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we
can hear you, yeah.
Can you see me also? Oh wait, sorry. No? No, I do not want that. Can you see me also?
No.
No.
How do I do that?
It's a little camera right by your mic button at the bottom of your.
Yeah. The one on to the camera button's blocked out for me. All right.
Celine! Celine like overwatching all of the
Why don't I leave?
Ooh.
That could be a browser problem. Okay, what browser should I use?
I'm in Chrome.
I'm in Chrome.
All right, well, maybe come back and
I'll leave and come back.
Come back and back in.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Celine is here. She's overlooking. She's here. She can hear us. Thank you.
Huh. That sucks. All right.
Look at that. I think we have 78 people watching us figure out how to make sure everyone gets in the room. Now it's 80. Great. We're gonna get there.
There we go.
Oh, okay. We've got Claire.
Okay.
We've got it. Okay, and let me
Hi Jacob. Hi Emily. How are you?
Hey.
Yeah, and just check in. And maybe give people a couple minutes. I know they finished the other session a couple minutes early so people could get a stretch in.
Okay.
And I think, and we're waiting on Troy to join us as well.
Right.
So give people a minute or two.
Margaret, thank you for organizing everything so nicely. I appreciate it.
Oh, I simply passed the wonderful organizational information that Celine and the ETC team provided us to make this go so smoothly, and
super,
and Ariane as well.
Oh, awesome! Thank you, everyone. Great. And I interviewed my HBCU potential interns today. They're very impressive.
Oh, that is wonderful. I'm very excited. We're going to be able to talk about that a little bit today too.
Exactly.
I think one of the things we also, for people who are joining us, we have a poll. So there's obviously lots of topics that we can go over on getting to how investors get to yes. So that's in your poll column on the right side. If you want to give us some live feedback on what we want to talk about today. It looks like Troy's actually in the room. let me see if I invite him, if he can join us. We'll get him pulled up too.
Needs to know he needs to go to the top right to the share.
I just didn't. Oh, nope. Oh, I accidentally invited him to a private session. Nope. Ignore that.
Troy, if you can hear us, there's a green button in the top right that says something like allow access to audio and video. All right, well, we'll let Claire finish that email, and then we'll we'll jump in. I'm sure he'll get to us when he's. Let's see. Okay, well, we'll do the old trick of as soon as we get started, then everybody comes in, right? So we'll see how it goes. Thanks everyone for joining us today for How to Get to Yes, a group of investors sharing how they decide to invest. We're excited we have a few different topics that we're going to go through. As I showed before, there's a poll that we're going to be referencing back to. And as you have questions, you can go through in the chat and share this with us as well. To get us started, we are going to go round robin to share. And I have my questions up on both sides here. So let me make sure that I'm not reading the wrong thing. So we're going to ask everyone to go around and share. Tell us your name, your current role, and a little bit about the investment thesis for your fund pre-March 2020. So before COVID, before George Floyd, before the demonstrations for Black Lives Matter, and then your investment thesis for your fund now and how it's changed. So I'll invite Emily to kick us off.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me and for moderating this. I'm Emily Durfee. I am part of the HealthWorks team, which is the corporate innovation investor arm of Care Stories Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I lead the HealthWorks Hub, which is basically how we engage with early entrepreneurs through incubation, investment, and other types of support programs. I was not part of the team before COVID, so I get away from that answer a little bit, but I can talk about what we're focusing on now in this kind of post or mid-COVID world, which is basically this understanding that, we focus on healthcare companies, and this has shown a spotlight on where we are falling short in covering the most vulnerable of our populations and the dramatic consequences that it has on their lives. And so I think some of the things that we're really focused on are, trying to figure out solutions that address some of those inequities in our healthcare system, trying to better align payer and provider and other healthcare systems to, make sure that we actually have kind of lower overall cost of care within our country, and then continuing to leverage the opportunity that we have around digital health to provide other types of healthcare to patients, as well as just figuring out what the left field ideas are. I feel like those are always the most exciting, or the unanticipated opportunities.
And I'll do a quick plug for all of our panelists to make sure that our volume is up and we're projecting into our microphones too.
Was that not easy to hear?
No, I think you were okay. I could hear you, but my volume's turned up way high. So I just a friendly reminder for everybody. So, all right, Claire, you're up next.
All right. Thanks, Margaret, and thanks for having me today. And thank you to the whole ETC staff. This has been a lovely event. So I appreciate everybody's patience and flexibility in the time of COVID. And appreciate everybody who's here today at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. So thank you for being zoomed out, but still joining us. So, so happy to be here. My name's Claire Barreto Johnson. I'm currently the managing director of a fund called the Maryland Momentum Fund. We are a University System of Maryland funded investment group that invests in early stage startups loosely affiliated with the University System of Maryland. Prior to that, I was a serial entrepreneur. I've had a bunch of clean energy startups, and I pivoted to this opportunity because I really like helping early stage. And I really like trying to support and build the entrepreneurial community here in Maryland. So happy to be here.
Great. Jacob?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. I'm Jacob Vogelstein. I'm the co-founder and managing partner, co-managing partner. There's a lot of feedback. I don't know where that's coming from. Let me turn my volume down for myself. Anyway, co-founder and co-managing partner of Calio Capital Management, which is an investment firm that I run alongside my partner, George Petrakoulis. We run a life science venture fund called Nexus, where we invest in early stage drugs, devices, and diagnostics, all the way up through pre-IPO crossover rounds, so a full spectrum of investments. I would say we have had no material change to any of our practices or our policies since COVID. I think, if anything, we've been more active over the past 6 months than probably ever before in the first 6 years of the fund. So for what that's worth, we've found, there's a crazy set of circumstances in the world, and I don't think anybody can be too happy with all of them. But from an investment perspective, we've had probably doubled our committed capital in the fund since March, and probably quadrupled the number of investments we've made over that same time period. So anyway, things have been very active on our end.
Yes. Oh, okay, great. We have Emily back. Well, I'll also jump in and share who I am, which maybe that's what I should have started with. But hi, I am Margaret Roth. I'm the Director of Portfolio Operations at Squadra Ventures. As a fund, we're a $25 million fund. We're just sort of going into our sort of almost 2 years old at this point. And pre-March 2020, we're really focusing on great founders, and investing in great founders and great teams. But what this year really forced us and sort of inspired us to really to get to more refinement in that thesis. So we invest in founders who are working to really not just build really strong, great teams, but that have a positive impact on the world. So we're really starting to hone in on more of bringing a truly enterprise social good lens to our investments going forward, and doing that with a lot of urgency. And sort of on the other side of things, we really tried to, and working to make very actionable and tangible commitment to and expectation for our companies to grow diversity within their teams. And that sort of starts with really getting involved in those hires that take the companies from 5 to 15 and set that as part of their foundation. Those are probably the two biggest changes that we made over the last year. Year, come on, it's now October. It's only really been 6 months, or since that change point. But what a year. So to take us into our sort of more our discussion part of our conversation, I think we're going to go ahead and start with, the big question: how to raise money as a startup. So we'll start with that topic first. So to our panelists, founders know they have a clear goal going into a conversation with a funder, right? Getting the funds they need at a valuation they want. And sometimes they don't always consider the investors' goals as well. So what are your goals going into a meeting with a founder, and what should founders do to ensure their goals are aligned with those of investors?
I'll start. It really depends on where exactly the company. So I look at anything from pre-seed companies to Series A companies. That's our sweet spot. And what I always look at is several very specific things. One is the CEO coachable? Is this person somebody who actually can take feedback and internalize that feedback and do something with that. I look for CEOs who have both empathy and not a very big ego, because I think this is a very, it's a tough space. Being an entrepreneur is tough. And somebody who's very egomaniacal often it has a tough time being successful. From a business perspective, not a personnel perspective, it really all boils down to market traction. Do you have any market traction? And we're industry agnostic. So I'm looking at everything from jet propulsion engines to aquaculture to, red blood cells to medical technology to all sorts of other things. And so, there's different things that define market traction in industries. So some of the life sciences companies that Jacob sees and I see, just getting past getting SBIR funding and getting a government consultant that's going to help you get through the FDA process is something that's really valuable. With a CPG product, you want to see sales. But I think, from a personnel perspective, it really boils down to, is this person coachable? And from an investment perspective, is what sort of market traction is the company getting? And I didn't answer your first question, Margaret, which was, how have I seen things differently pre-COVID and now COVID? I am seeing a lot more digital healthcare apps, which is understandable. And, frankly, from a university perspective, professors are still cranking out what they're cranking out. And so that hasn't really changed a lot. And I am finding that there are a lot of investors who remain open for business. I think deal flow from our perspective has slowed down a bit, but we too are trying to be very intentional about diversifying our advisory board and looking for underrepresented founders in the companies that we invest in.
Can you guys hear me better? Working better? Okay.
Yes, way better.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, most VCs are looking for similar types of, kind of market traction and team dynamics and strong founders. And I think something else that we often talk about is kind of resilience and grit within a founding team, right? Like, things are going to be really, really hard. How much capacity does someone have to deal with that to bounce back from those failures? I think the other thing that is interesting just to dig into in the VC landscape is that, while everyone kind of has relatively similar criteria of like what they're looking for in kind of company success level, we're all coming from slightly different stakeholders, right? Ultimately, we all have like different LPs or different places where that funding is coming from and different goals for that funding. And I think that nuance is where it gets really interesting, right? Of like, so for example, from my perspective, I do represent a larger healthcare company. And so there are certain pieces of what I'm looking for and trying to make sure that I'm furthering some of the value and the strategy that we want to see in the market. And, Care First mission around kind of affordability, accessibility, like those are things that are underpin the types of companies that I'm looking for. So in addition to the kind of, I wouldn't say it basic, but standardized checklist of, high quality team, high quality financials, like some level of proof, whether that's, entrepreneur success or interesting idea or, traction or whatever, right? Like, there's also all of that kind of strategy sitting behind me that I think is really important to think through.
Yeah. Jacob, anything to add? I know we're trying not.
I'm not sure whether we're getting called on or we're just volunteering. So,
yeah, I don't. Yeah, no, I'm not trying to call on.
No, it's fine. I would say, I would say the answer is maybe more uniform. A few of the other panelists commented that we're all kind of looking for the same thing, but I think that's maybe more true within an industry, a set of verticals that people are investing in. Maybe it's true in almost all of them, except for the sort of life sciences and the sort of IP, more like deep tech based spaces where I think, for us, although, so first of all, for us, there's really never any traction, no market. It doesn't exist usually from the entire time the investment exists as a private company. There's very rarely substantial revenue driving a decision. So, for at least what we do in the life sciences, we're much more sensitive to track record and experience and sort of demonstrated success, either through, because the founders are, serially themselves, because the CEO and the management team is highly seasoned and has done this 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Maybe because of the investor syndicate has a fantastic record of partnering with companies and driving them to successful outcomes. So we have our own kind of idiosyncratic investment criteria for sure, but the number one sort of organizing principle around what drives us to make an investment is what is the past performance of this team, and that we usually use that as good of indicator as any as what is the likelihood of future success.
Well, with that as a jumping in point, Troy has joined us as well. So want to give him a chance to jump in with a little bit, Troy, to come back to getting us started. Name, current role, and how your investment thesis has changed since March 2020. So now we're COVID, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd. We're in a very different place now, and then we'll roll back into into our questions.
You're muted, Troy.
Oh.
Oh no.
Still muted. Oh, we got it.
Turn it up.
You did now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try it all over again. That's what I get. I guess what happens when you use a Mac versus a PC. Maybe that's the issue. My name is Troy Lamel.
Controversial.
Exactly. I'm Troy Lamel Stovall. I'm the new Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director for Maryland TEDCO. Very happy to be here. I think I didn't get to hear my other colleagues, but I know a little bit about them. I think we're the little bit of the odd duckling here. We're obviously a state-backed venture entity. And at a really simple level, we really are two kind of pieces of the puzzle. We provide a number of funding, I call them funding vehicles. We have both investment vehicles as well as grants that we do. But we also provide advisory services and wraparound services to help particularly those communities that don't know about entrepreneurship, what it takes to build a business plan. And so we have a number of those services and actually work with some of the colleagues that are on this call today. I think as far as COVID, I think we're still figuring that out. I think part of the challenge for us, and I think all of us, is that just like 9/11 changed our behavior about how we got on the airplanes and how we thought about security, COVID is changing how our behaviors are thinking. And I think the role that technology is going to do to support that is still TBD. And I think, but I think some of the premises that I did hear a little bit that are always going to be fundamental to venture capital. We're always looking for quality people, people who really get it and understand how to put together those teams. And that's a part of what we do at TEDCO in terms of helping particularly folks from certain communities understand how to put those teams together and how to think about putting those teams together. But at the end of the day, it's all about the people, but it still is all about the idea. And is that idea something that can, at the end of the day, for TEDCO, produce something for Maryland, create jobs for Maryland, but at some point scale up and really create a real opportunity for folks here in Maryland. And so that's a lot of what we focus on. And as Claire knows, a lot of us is kind of staging things so that she can eventually invest in them and providing that scale capital to both Claire and some of the other colleagues here. So I'm very happy to be here. Again, apologize for my tardiness, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Great.
Yeah, so sort of circling all that together. So this is, I think, my 8th Baltimore Innovation Week. So very different than previous ones. I'm sure we had a little bit of look back on the past today too. But one of the things that this is the first time. So prior to this, I was a VC-backed startup founder in the area, and so now sort of being on the other side of the table, one of the things that I wanted to add as what should founders really think about when they're talking to potential investors is really bringing a sense of authenticity and being who they really are, because those two things have to, like what the VC needs and their goals and what the entrepreneur wants and their vision for their company have to align, and so that starts with authenticity. So kind of taking a look at sort of through that lens as well. there's always this excitement and congratulations and press that comes with raising money, and that's a big part of what first-time founders see. But there's definitely strings that are attached to that cash. So what do you think are the other big considerations that founders don't take into account when they're raising capital? Anyone have a favorite answer? I'm not going to call on anyone anymore.
Everyone comes to the table thinking they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? And I think the humbleness is something that I'm sometimes looking for. I mean, there's actually a fine line there between humility and confidence, and you don't want too much confidence because there's an ego there. Because in my world, I've always found that it's rare that that original idea that they came to the table with is the one that ends up being the real one that's the level of success. And so to answer your question more succinctly, it's that humility and ability to accept coaching and feedback, as well as the money. And I think too many times they think they already have the idea. And to me, that's a turnoff. You already think you have the idea and you aren't willing to listen. That would be a turnoff for me.
I would say, I'll chime in. I would say, at least again, in our section of the investing world, I think, the thing that I think we see most commonly with first-time founders is probably an outsized focus on dilution. And, I know this is different within tech investing more broadly and life sciences investing, where there tends to be more founder focus overall in the tech sector than there is in the life science sector. A lot of times the CEO and the founding team in a life sciences company is important, but is expected to own, even as little as 20% of the company, even after, 1 or 2 rounds of financing, and just much less of a sort of focus on the founder control and kind of this cult of personality that sometimes comes with the big kind of unicorn valuations in the tech sector. But just in general, for those people who are listening to this and who are in the life sciences, I would say, a lot of times we see people pulling back on raising the amount of capital that they might have access to because they're worried about taking in too much or giving up, too much control. And I think people maybe underestimate the value of having a strong investor syndicate and a strong network that comes with that. And sometimes are maybe, will take less and find that they're disadvantaged by being the person who they think, by basically calling all the shots and kind of pushing off some of the other more seasoned investors. They certainly retain more of the company, but I think it's in some cases to their detriment. So I know that
they sort of like miss that opportunity to accelerate based on they sort of missed the bigger opportunity because they weren't willing to take the risk or the compromise earlier.
Yeah, or honestly, I mean, so much of what makes success in our part of the industry is the relationships that, if you don't have those relationships, it's really hard to be successful. And it's hard to get those relationships other than by bringing people into the fold. And that, it typically means that you're giving up some control, you're giving up some equity, but, ultimately, I think you're benefited from the experience of people who have done this, 100 times and generated 100 IPOs and, know 100 people that can help with the company. And that's just kind of an invaluable resource, I think.
Yeah, I'd add, it's interesting, all of us are answering this a bit of a different way, because I think Margaret's question was, what should founders be paying attention to when they're raising money instead of just getting the money? And I think I agree with Jacob and Troy that, a lot of it has to do with, do you click as an organization and do you click as people together? But from a business perspective, in whatever industry you're in, a lot of it has to do with, can this investor help me in other ways rather than just getting money? Can they help me create more sales? I am, trying to create the next version of Coca-Cola, and I want to, an investor who's a distributor that can help me sell my new Coca-Cola, right? I mean, are there any channel partnerships that investor can help me with? Are there people at that investor group that can help me get introductions to the people I want to sell to or people I want to partner with. That's what I always think of. And sometimes as an early stage entrepreneur, you don't have the luxury to be picky about who your investor is going to be. It really depends on where you are in your cycle. But to the extent that you can choose investors who are in your sector, who invest in your sector, who have, invested in competitors to something that you're doing, and who can get you channel partnerships rather than just dumb money, that's always helpful.
I think building on Claire's point, the one other piece is also knowing when to walk away from an investor, right? Like so often I think, just in general, like people, need money and entrepreneurs need money to build their businesses, and VC is kind of touted as the best type of money in the current kind of startup ecosystem. But I think being able to be really considerate about kind of generally speaking, what does your capital stack ideally look like? When does VC money make sense versus debt versus, just funding through revenue? Like organic growth, right? How do you actually think about what type of world you want to see with your business and what type of capital and investors are going to get you to that point? Because, I think that there is a reality in which, depending on the investor, right, they may have specific timelines when they're hoping for exits and they have LPs that are waiting for money. And like, it really depends on kind of what is moving behind the scenes in their world. And like, are you aligned on how fast you want to grow and how that company or how that investor is going to support your company and all of those different pieces. And I think those are all really critical kind of preliminary questions to ask. And then you go through the process of vetting an investor to figure out, is this the one that will get us there through their support, their networks, the capital, et cetera.
Yeah.
So on that, and sort of bringing all of those factors together, for each of your funds, what does an investable plan mean? What does that look like? In the high level, we're in a panel version, right? So, or the unique factors of investable plans for your funds.
I think we're all struggling to answer this question a little bit in that, there's not one recipe, right? It very much is unique, but I guess like maybe that uniqueness is the answer, at least from my perspective of, we're looking for someone that has something a little bit extra, right? That could be someone who is incredibly charismatic and gritty as a founder. It could be someone who has deep knowledge in their area and or expertise in that area. It could be someone who has successfully founded a business in the past or has networks of people who can support them, right? It's looking for that, X factor or like that uniqueness compared to other entrepreneurs that gives them the edge to be able to build something that's really successful.
Yeah, and I think also just having a plan is really important. One of the things that I found, and this is with earlier stage startups, but not always, is that the founder has a brilliant idea and perhaps a brilliant technology and is doing a really good job getting the market traction or getting the government contracts or going through approval processes that they need to go to. But something that I think every entrepreneur should spend time doing, whether they give it to an investor or not, is really put together a timeline from left to right and think through, and have a bunch of different rows. One is funding. How much money are you actually going to need right now? Don't try to raise too much. Don't try to raise too little. But how much is it really going to take in terms of dollars before you get commercially operational? Technology. Where are you with the technology? You've got an SBIR grant or an MII grant. You've got some money from TEDCO. Where is your technology right now? Another one might be, government, right? Or approval processes. What I have found lacking in the Maryland community with a lot of the early stage startups that I've been looking at is there's not a very specific plan for how they're planning on getting from today to commercial operation date to wild success. Mm-hmm. Lack of being thoughtful about how all of those things interplay.
Yeah, and on to Claire's point, particularly where we sit in that timeline, because as Claire knows, we see everything from what I call the science fair projects that are coming right out of our research institutions to pre-revenue. They kind of have an idea of it. But even through all of that, we're still looking for that. Does the technology make sense? Is there a real potential market for that technology? Is there somebody who's going to buy it, at the end of the day? because our goal at TEDCO, as I said a while ago, is to put a little bit in to try to create the leverage later on. And so we want to try to make sure that what we're doing is not just providing those funds. And so when they come to us, to answer your question, Margaret, that they, as my colleagues already said, they've been thoughtful, but many times they've only thought through the technology. They haven't thought through the marketability. And so part of what we're adding is that, is this a marketable thing, particularly when we get to some of our great professors coming out of our university. They've got some great technology, but it might be 20 years before that thing has a real market to it. And we've seen that kind of stuff. And so having something that has a reality of the reality, as I like to call it, is what we're looking for in stuff that comes to us.
I like that reality of the reality. Probably need to add one more reality of the reality of the reality to really get us down to the next 6 months, right? Or how we're going to take this investment and make it start having an impact. To switch gears for a second, one of the things that I know was in sort of our pre-session that we all really dug in on and really wanting to highlight that this is a really, we wanted to represent a diverse group of not just funds, but of people in this panel. And we're also all doing different things to work on supporting the huge increased focus on diversity and representation in our area and in the country. So we know that that's just the first step. But that second step is really the one that leads to lasting changes. How do we be more inclusive? So I'd love for people to share what they're doing to ensure that working at your startups or the founders of companies or any of the companies that you're working with is inclusive for women and people of color.
I'll start. So I think two things we're trying to do at TEDCO. One is at a simple level, just track it. To be more intentional about the tracking of it and the reporting of it. And I've committed as a new CEO to the board and to the legislature that we're going to track it and not just track what we're doing, but frankly, track what we're turning down. Because I think we need to know as much as what we're doing, as much as what we're not doing. And having an understanding if we have any institutional biases in what we do in our business processes and what we're doing. But the other thing is we talked about, I think in the pre-session, and I've talked to a lot of folks about, is we spend a lot of time, rightfully so, talking about the founders, and that's the right thing to do. And what happens, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody, what happens when the white guy starts a firm, he surrounds himself with other white guys. And it's just what they do. I ain't mad about them. I got a lot of white guy friends too. Couple come about a night anyway. So what we have to do is be more intentional about creating a pool of talent that's beyond that's more representative of Maryland. And so that's what we're going to do. We're in the process of trying to think through how do we create that pool of talent. So when we do make these investments, we can say, hey, Joe, here's a great computer scientist or data analyst from Coppin State. Here's somebody great from Frostburg that you would not have thought about, but for us creating that opportunity set for them. And so we have to be more intentional about what I call employees number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, because we spend a lot of time talking about employee number 1, the founder, but employees 2 through 10, or put whatever number you want on that, I think is just as critical. And that's where the diversification and inclusion can come in too. And by the way, and I'll close, that's where you can also, again, assuming success, that's where you plant the seeds right there, because they've been invited into this network that they weren't part of before. If there's a success, they create some wealth, which is really what we should be talking about. I don't think we spend enough time talking about the real wealth creation that we should be doing with these. And that wealth creation then gets reinvested back into those communities. And that's how you really draw that out.
Yeah. I think it goes back a little bit. Go ahead.
No, you're up.
Okay. I think it goes a little bit also back to, sort of what is your deal thesis and where are you bucketing yourself? So what I mean by that is, so for example, my fund, I have two focuses. One, of course, is to make money, but another is to try to help build the entrepreneurial community, right? So I spend a lot of my time, I'm not a mercenary VC, I spend a lot of my time advising early stage startups, right? That when I know I'm not going to fund them and they're not, not easy to, there's no way that something's going to happen, but I spend a lot of time with them because part of my job is to try to build the entrepreneurial community. Similarly, like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to diversify our advisory board. And I'm trying to be super intentional about going out and spending more time trying to find African-American owned and founded companies and women founded companies. Of the 22 investments that the Maryland Momentum Fund has made, 6 of them have been founded by women. 5 of those have been investments by me since we started. Only one of the founders of the 22 companies that we've invested in thus far is Black. And that's a real problem, right? So why are we not finding them? Why are they not coming to us? And some of that's, digging deep and being really intentional and making sure that they feel like they belong here and that they, deserve a seat just like anybody else. And part of it is that I have a very specific mandate, right? Which you guys all have very different mandates. My mandate is I'm required to only invest in companies that either have IP from one of our 12 universities, that rent space from one of our 12 universities, or where the founder is a CEO, student, or alum. And so, we have to be really honest with ourselves and look at ourselves in the mirror and say, all right, 35% of companies in the state of Maryland are minority owned. Do they all meet those 3, do those minority owned businesses meet those 3 criteria or not? And if not, should we change the criteria? How, and being really thoughtful about that. I don't have all the answers, but those are the things that we're starting to grapple with.
Yeah, and one of the things so for our fund one way that we operate a little differently is that we sort of spend 80% of our time working with companies after we've made the investment. So that's sort of why my whole role exists as being director of our portfolio ops program. And one of the things that we do through that is we're working with our management team, not just our CEOs, but our management teams on a weekly or bi-weekly cadence. And one of the big things that we've done is gotten very involved in that hiring piece. And like Troy said that 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, for us, it's usually 5 through 10 that we're working on this with at the point that we're making the investment. But really put together a playbook for inclusive hiring practices for our companies. And one of the biggest things about that is encouraging them to find team members really force them to get outside of their first and second degree networks and use their resources and part of the investment to take on recruiters for key roles, so that we're really getting outside of the immediate network as well. And then just also at the fund level, I think there's 2 sides of the equation, right? Like the more people of color who are at funds, the more accessible and we will diversify the deal flow as well. So one of the things that we recently launched and we're part of sort of helping lead up locally is the HBCU VC program here in Baltimore. So we're working with 15 other funds in the area, place HBCU students from our local HBCU in our area. So 15 different students for year-long internships at Baltimore area VCs. So that's something, so it has to be on both sides of the equation too. Is really what I wanted to get at.
Yeah, and if I may, Mark, if we're going to be honest, let's be honest. I mean, this is a structural societal problem that we're talking about here. And so God bless all these things we're going to do, but there's just some very tough structural things that we aren't just going to fix immediately. And so I'm an old computer scientist by training, and so I'm used to the version 1, version 2, version 3 of software, and so I'm used to version 1 of software being my old mentor told me you just get it out and it's going to be buggy, it's not going to solve everything, but the point is to get it out. And the point I'm making is we need to just try some stuff. Just like we all are venture capitalists and entrepreneurs, there's things we just got to launch and do, and then try the next version, and then try the next version. And so I think there has to be more of an intentionality to do, and we can plan all we want, but we gotta, because there's just so many things here that are just wrong and broken. And Claire sees this, I see it. So many of these entrepreneurs come to us, and I use myself as an example. I didn't know how to read a Wall Street Journal, what a business was, till I was a junior in college. And so there was an exposure that I wasn't a part of. And there's so much of the educational piece that we have to do. So these are smart people. They just haven't been exposed to understand how to put together a business plan, how to put together a talent plan, how to put they have no clue, but they may have a really good idea, but they don't know how to articulate it in the words that we understand. And so part of what I know we are doing, and I know Claire does too, is, and that sounds like you're doing too, Margaret, is that the educational and learning piece, there has to be an intentionality to that.
One of the things that,
Yeah, and I think the other
oh,
thing
go
is
ahead, Margaret.
like not making it have to be, oh, I was just saying, it's sort of like that, not letting perfect get in the way of the good, right? Like we need to start something and have an MVP and test it out. And even if that's version 0 and we're going to go to, or MVP 0 and we're going to go to version 1. So that, yeah, that's important. Jacob,
I was just going to say,
sorry,
I think one of the things I was interested to hear the question, because it's, it's a thing we've thought a lot about since inception. It's a thing that's been very important to me, just, really on a basic human level, not really anything more special than that, just trying to be inclusive. And, I do think that there are some industry kind of trends in life sciences that make this a little bit of a different equation than it is in some of the other investing. I mean, when we look at our portfolio, so we just closed our fund 2, and we have now 20 investments in our portfolio. And, I think when we look across our investments, we have more than 50% either have female CEOs or minority CEOs or C-level founders. Sometimes it's a CSO or something like that, and a CEO, but pretty high percentage, really partially without even really trying, more just maybe not being biased, on the intake. And I think, life sciences definitely has a higher percentage in general, of we're funding a lot of people with PhDs. We're funding a lot of companies that come out of academic, situations. Within the life sciences, I think there's a greater percentage of maybe non-white guys coming out of PhD programs, and especially on the East Coast, where we do source a lot of our tech, whether it's in Cambridge, Boston, up through Hopkins here, or even the New York area, we do see a pretty balanced kind of flow of scientific founders who are interested in spinning out companies and being able to get connected with the right groups. So I think part of it, honestly, we've thought about this for a while, because it's from the beginning of our fund, we had a kind of balanced portfolio in this regard. And I think a lot of it just comes from being open to hear what people have to say from the beginning. And I know that the statistics would say that we're definitely going to be seeing many more pitches from white guys than from any other demographic. But I think not just kind of being biased against the non-white guys turns out to lead to a lot of good opportunities without doing that much more even beyond that. There's obviously a huge amount of work that we would have to do to make sure that within each of these portfolio companies, there's balanced representations. And again, we're in a tiny minority of the venture investing landscape. So I'm not saying this is pervasive, but it does seem to be something that we've been able to, we've been able to do by just being open-minded to some extent.
Yeah, it's sort of, I think one of the big things that I think we're all getting at is like, we as investors think we are going to bring this up and have these conversations with our companies, because we know that this is what moves it forward. And I think there's a lot of funds out there that won't have those conversations or won't press on that. So I think that in trending, I think entrepreneurs need to be ready to answer those questions and have that conversation about how you are going to diversify your team and what you're looking at and like, what are all those other factors. Claire, I loved your analogy of making the table. And like, that's another line I want to add to our table. Maybe that's one of our follow-ups from this session is we'll make a table.
Right, I'm in. Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to add, Margaret, is just in terms of the sort of diversifying, a lot of it really does have to do with networks and networking. And, I feel very lucky. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've lived in Baltimore since 2002. I'm not originally from here, but I've been a serial entrepreneur here since 2002. And, most of the work that I've done as a clean energy entrepreneur has neither been based here nor have I found any investment dollars from here. and I've had to go to Boston or Silicon Valley to find my money. And I think, the growth of the entrepreneurial community here really relies upon developing networks. I mean, just as evidenced by this panel, like Margaret's been kind enough to introduce us to HBCU VC. So we're going to get an intern from, Howard State. Jacob's on my advisory board. Emily was on my expert panel last week, and Troy and I, do due diligence together on individual companies, right? And that's because of the network I've been able to develop recently. I've only been doing this for a little over a year, and I have been able to presume that I can just develop that network because I'm a white female who's smart, who can get phone calls with people. But if you are a 21-year-old African-American male from West Baltimore, I don't think you can presume that. So some of it also is how do we, diversify and include more people in all of our networks.
And so my favorite panel tip for being on a panel is, so I know we're the ones talking at the group today, but each and every one of us would love to be connected with you on LinkedIn. So never hesitate to reach out, say hey, and make that connection, because that's really what it is. You never know what one conversation today or saying hi or what we see a month from now that each other posts like that is, I know that seems very almost like a fragile connection, but those are the pieces that interlace and lead you ultimately to getting where you want to go. So that's an active step. So let's see. So have about 10 minutes left. So I did want to give us a second if there are any big questions that from the audience. I think Ariane might have been collecting some of those, but to get us started, do any of the panelists have a question that sparked for them for each other?
Hey, Margaret, I see a comment on there's a lot of good chat happening. And I'm caught by one here that talks about one gentleman's having a difficult time talking about because he sees what's happening in Baltimore. And I can appreciate that being a Black man, and I've been in the investment game, but the numbers are real. Less than 1% of venture capital goes to companies managed or started by Black people. That's just the numbers. When you look at the number of Blacks on the Silicon Valley boards, it's abysmal, right? When you look at the number of women that get money's access to venture capital, it's abysmal. And so there absolutely, we as Blacks have had to be very entrepreneurial. There's all kinds of great stories of the things that we have done because of the issues that we face in this country. And those are facts, but that's also a fact that we don't have access to capital. It's also a fact we have not had the same level of access to capital for a variety of reasons. And then we could spend a whole other seminar on just that. And so I'm one of these people that believe we need to have the tough conversations and be honest about these tough conversations, because if we keep trying to paint them with pretty words, we'll never have the really conversation that needs to be had to break through these situations, whether it be for women or for people of color.
Very much agree. And Jeff Terry, thanks for coming in with this question. Jeff's bringing up the point that there's a ton of Black wealth in Baltimore. How do we get them off the sidelines?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
I mean, look, I'll do a commercial for us, and all of us can. Look, I've got a small, Claire knows, I've got a thing called the Builder Fund. That's a small amount of money. It's really not enough scale. I'd love to get external monies into the Builder Fund. The Builder Fund is focused on, quote, communities are disadvantaged. That's what I have to say publicly. But we obviously have funds that we try to focus on women and people of color. And so I'd love to have these folks come to us. And again, I'm doing an advertising for TechCo. We have the opportunity to drive that. We have the resource to drive that. And I'm more than happy to come talk to any group that wants to know about what we could do to help drive that and to change that.
Right. I think to answer Jeff's question, I mean, I think, all early stage startups are risky, right? So, I think to have anybody invest in early stage startup as an angel investor, as an individual angel investor, which none of us on this panel are in our professional capacity, though I'm a member of Baltimore Angels and I'm sure y'all are doing stuff too, is becoming more creative about connecting investors and doing due diligence collectively, right? So, I mean, I think, having a whole lot more people join either Baltimore Angels or some new angel group, because doing due diligence together is super important, right? And, de-risking early stage startups as much as you can as an angel investor, I think is really critical. But we're all talking to each other, right? All of us that are on this panel right now and who are listening to this panel right now have drunk the Kool-Aid, and we believe in early stage startups. What Jeff's asking about, which is super critical, is how do we get people who haven't drunk the Kool-Aid? And I do think, not to get on my soapbox, but I think, some of why Maryland is a tough place to raise money is that most people who have made money here have made money from relatively risk-averse places. They've made money from real estate or from government contracting or manufacturing. We don't have a bunch of Facebook alums. We don't have a bunch of Amazon alums like there are on the West Coast or in Boston. And so we have to be creative about how we get those people to open their pocketbooks, because somebody who's made all their money in manufacturing is not really going to invest in a new widget because he doesn't know anything about it. So how do we share due diligence broadly and get people to understand, here's what's going on, here are the opportunities available.
Well said, Claire. I like that. Well said. Well said. Well said.
I agree with all of those pieces. I do think one additional thing I would add to that, though, is also just changing the conversation from like de-risking early stage investments, because like exactly as you said, they're always going to be risky. And so how do you get people from more traditional backgrounds who have made wealth in much more risk-averse ways to see it as some combination of, a very risky move, no matter how much due diligence or shared due diligence you have, but important in building, I think as mentioned, right, the overall kind of accumulation of wealth in different communities and starting to give back into that, whether or not they expect returns, and like diversifying a portfolio enough that even if each individual investment is risky, hopefully one of them will make money along kind of the VC lines.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll add that to our action list for this panel also, is maybe that is a more working group conversation of investors and how we're going to cross that bridge to get other people. How do you get other people to start investing? Because I think we didn't even touch on our angel group or angel opportunities in this panel intentionally. So I think there's big development that could grow into that in Baltimore. So we'll leave that one for another panel. So that's a whole other hour of this conversation. So we have just a few minutes left. So I wanted to give us a moment to sort of take a minute to reflect back on our panel. I know we've gone a lot of different places in this discussion, and we could have gone many others. But we're going to do a quick Brene Brown style rapid fire set of responses to a few questions. So we'll just go around the room here. And Emily, we'll start with you this time and go in a circle. So what's a book or movie that every entrepreneur should watch?
This is not a book or movie. I'm a big fan of First Round Review, which is this like newsletter by the First Round Investment Group, which I find to have really interesting perspectives for entrepreneurs.
Okay, I'll go. The book I would suggest is Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity by David Allen. It's an old one, but a good one.
I'll go. You'll love my one. It's Dr. Seuss. Oh, the places you'll go.
So, yep. Jacob.
I don't know if this is a book that I have to think through my entire sort of like library of books, but a book that I've read in the last year that was really kind of amazing is a book on Jim Simons, who some of people may know as the founder of one of the most successful quantitative hedge funds in the world. And the reason why it's interesting is that he's an academic that leaves his academic post and really struggles through about 20 years of what amounts to running his own investing startup until he ends up on a formula through a lot of trials and tribulations that ends up with him being, probably the most successful investor of all time. So it's just it's an interesting story of perseverance, even from people who, you would think would start off with all of the advantages. Still, everything's hard for everyone.
Mine is the hard thing about hard things is my book recommendation. My movie recommendation is General Magic.
Oh, good
We'll try to
one.
list these ones on. General Magic is really good. That's like all the every startup needs to watch that movie. It's how you'll miss all the things that you may make mistakes on, or at least know about them.
I used to work with
what are you really? Ooh, okay, we're gonna talk about that later too. What is something that you are most excited about happening in Baltimore in the coming year?
Emily.
I mean, this is selfish, but I'm really excited to launch the incubation program that we're going to be running for early stage health startups.
Cool. I'm excited about the digital healthcare industry and about the education technology industry. I've done 2 education technology startup investments, and there's just so much cool stuff coming out. Also as a parent, I'm sick as hell of having everything online, but just there's a lot going on. It's interesting. Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe. Go, Jacob.
I was going to say, on a personal level, I love that they closed all the streets and you can eat dinner outside everywhere. That's awesome. I know that's like a consequence of coronavirus, but I still think it's a nice permanent change if we can keep it. On a professional level, I'm actually really excited. Alexandria Real Estate is opening up a big life sciences incubator in the city, and they've been a great landlord for a huge number of early stage life science companies. They invest in early stage life science companies. They have a great network of co-investors. And I think it'll be a great asset for the city as it builds out that part of the startup kind of community.
Yeah, for me, given my newness, I mean, I've had a chance in my few weeks here to visit a number of the incubators and maker spaces there in Baltimore, and I'm just more excited about visiting more of them and really getting them to be connected more. I think part of this is there's a connective tissue that could be even more strengthened across, not just within Baltimore, of course, because Maryland, given my definitely within Baltimore, connecting them and elevating them as well.
Excited for a new mayor. I'm just gonna throw it out there and say it. That's what I'm in here for. I'm ready for it. I'm here for it.
Already.
Okay, and then our last one. So whether we said it on this panel or not, what's the one piece of advice that you want every founder and everyone in our audience to take away from this conversation?
Apparently,
I wrote this.
all of this. So I think something that I have always found really helpful is just the adage like show, don't tell, right? And that like really fundamentally the proof is in what you're able to do. It's not how much you can present it or talk about it. And in fact, the way that you talk about it can lead into all of the problematic heuristics that we've talked about in bias and all of these other pieces. So show what you're able to do, and exciting about that.
Yeah. For me, it's listen.
Build relationships early and often, long before you think you'll need any.
So I'm gonna say ditto to all 3.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say, don't let perfect get in the way of the good.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed getting us all to get to know each other better and get to share this candid thoughts with our community here. And congrats, everyone, to another great Baltimore Innovation Week Day celebration. And definitely looking forward to doing it in person next year. So
yeah, and thanks to EPC for organizing it all.
Yeah, and thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. All right, take care.
Everybody have a great weekend.
And just one closing note for the audience. So we will be sharing out the best way to reach all of us. If you are ready to pitch anyone who you've heard talk today, so that will be coming out as well as part of the wrap-up materials. So we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.